Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Know-How is brought to you by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This episode of Know-How is brought to you by Braintree. If you're working on a mobile app and searching for the right payments API, check out Braintree V.0 SDK. With one simple integration, you get every way to pay. To learn more and to try out the sandbox, go to BraintreePayments.com/knowhow. And by Casper, an online retailer of premium mattresses for a fraction of the price. Because everyone deserves a great night's sleep. Get $50 off any mattress purchase by visiting Casper.com/knowhow and enter the promo code KNOWHOW.
Today on Know-How, we have augmented reality for your car,
A thrust tester for you quadcopter fiends,
and a Gameboy mod.
and don't forget, your questions are answers. Know-How is next.
Yeah, we can work with that.
Boom, boom, doo-doo, boom, boom, doo-doo.
Poor Zach doesn't know to do this. That's fine. We're going to leave it in.
Welcome to Know-How. It's the Twitch show where we build, bend, break, and upgrade. I'm Father Robert Palliser.
And I'm Brian Burnett.
And for the next 45 to 80 minutes
to 78 minutes.
Some couple of days, we're going to be taking you through some of the projects that we've been doing so that you can take them home and geek out on your own.
That's right, because we're pretty big geeks.
Yeah.
And there's a few stories that pique our interest during the week. And this one's pretty cool because I'm a big fan of augmented reality.
Yes.
I've played with the Samsung VR goggles. But this one applies to cars.
This is specifically to cars. Now, we've seen more and more AR technology, which is augmented reality, versus VR. Now, people are more familiar with VR because that's the Oculus Rift.
Right.
It's the original, the Nintendo, was that the Game Boy?
Oh, God.
No, Virtual Boy. The
Virtual Boy.
Which was horrible. That was in no way VR. That was just seizure-inducing horribleness.
Yep. I had a headache for about 2 hours after that.
It was fun. But it's actually interesting technology, especially since some companies have stepped it up on what kind of 360 video you can take. But whereas I see virtual reality as more of game stuff.
Yeah, more of like an immersive world that you get into. Whereas VR is more of like an overlay, or AR, sorry. AR is an overlay of the existing surroundings that you have.
Yeah, and we've seen this. Remember, Microsoft made their big announcement along with Windows 10 of the glasses.
Yeah.
And this is the whole idea. Overlay stuff onto the actual world, not digitally composited, not recorded and played back. But for example, I could have glasses on and it's looking at you and it's saying Cranky Hippo. It has your Twitter address, your Facebook address.
You never have to know anybody's name ever again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What BMW announced this last week is they've released, they're showing off a prototype of a Mini that uses AR glasses to give you, just a plethora of information. So for example, not just the speed of your car and maybe the vital statistics, what's your RPM, what's your
gas
engine temp.
consumption.
Exactly. But also, you look around, and as you look around, it'll overlay the speed of the cars that are near your car. So you know how fast they're going.
Right. So if you're going along the freeway, you wait to see that person who's going just a little bit faster than you.
1 mile per hour
and they will
behind
be
them.
the buffer.
Exactly.
Wait for the cops to get that.
They're the CHP folk.
Right.
But then it gets more useful when you start combining it with, say, GPS. So you actually see a line that shows you where you should be driving. Or they showed this off on the demo. I really like this. The idea of putting the business names on buildings so you know what they are as they pass, and finding you open parking spots. That's like lighting them up. This would actually fit your car. It's a cool system.
This is all really cool, and I think I heard you covering this earlier. You were on the radio, but the amount of information that can be pushed to you, there may have to be some limiting factors because you wouldn't want to be driving by an ice cream shop and then all of a sudden like, hey, ice cream shop over here, like here's our advertisement, or there's just so much data that could be presented.
Someone just throws an ad right up.
Obviously, that wouldn't happen.
But Zach's got some B-roll that he can run for this, and the systems are great, and they work really well, and they're very cool. They're awe-inspiring. But you're absolutely right.
You totally don't look nerdy at all.
Nerdy at all. but you can't get too much information. And I mean, people are getting overwhelmed as it is right now with a modern car with the data screens everywhere.
Well, and the watches that we have now giving us notifications.
But it might actually be a generational thing. I think people are starting to get a little bit better, at least the younger generations, the millennials, with filtering out and fixing their interfaces so that they get just the right amount of information. So maybe I don't need my text messages popping up on my AR glasses. Maybe I don't need the speed of cars around me, but you know, having a GPS would be helpful because then I'm not looking down at a screen, or helping me to find a parking spot. So it cuts down on frustration. Or like in this case, this is an AR glass that would allow you to see a view from your quadcopter so that you don't have to have glasses blocking out your peripheral vision. There's definitely a use.
You've described to me it's a lot easier for you to be able to see footage from the quadcopter, but also have one eye available to see the quadcopter from where you're standing, so then you can, you know, move around objects and things more freely. It's certainly a direction that I'm excited about, and I guess coming from a generation that plays a lot of video games, the first thing
the HUD.
The first thing I imagine is a heads-up display where maybe if I'm on a track or something like that, it shows me where the apex of the turn is, it shows me how hard I should be braking or what my corner speed should be before I hit the apex. Like that sort of thing, I love that idea.
I think what I can say, and I'm pretty confident in this, is that AR is coming. You can't stop it. I mean, it is too good of a technology. It's too useful to say, well, it's a fad, it's going to fall out. No, it's actually a useful piece of kit. The question is whether or not you're going to find a company that will find the proper interface / balance between too much information and not enough information.
Yeah, it's going to be, I mean, we are at the very cusp of this, you know, new technology. So there's definitely going to be some growing pains. There's going to be some trial and error of figuring out like the best way to implement these technologies. But having something that just even basically will, without having to look away from where, you know, focus on the road, but be able to see like, oh, I need to turn at this intersection instead of trying to see like street signs and things like that.
It's good.
It's good.
It's going to work.
It's going to be cool.
In the future, you will have AR. The only question is whether or not you'll be able to process the data.
Ah, man.
Processing. Speaking of processing, you've been running a project the last couple of weeks. I've seen you down in the no-hole. You've been super dedicated on this. Now, last time, we took a look at your Game Boy project where you actually fixed a screen because you got the lines down the screen. But you decided to go one step further and fix something that the original Game Boy owners always kind of dreaded, and that is, without a backlight, you either had to have some ambient light or I had a little LED that like hooked up to the game port and showing over
the little worm light. Yeah, that was bad. And actually, Zach, who is thankfully covering for Alex today, T. Dean, he sent me the perfect gift for this. It was like a little comic, and it was like, the children of the past will never know the pain of riding in the back seat of the car and having to wait for street lights to go by to move on the screen.
Our portable game consoles didn't have backlights, folks. They didn't have nice bright screens. In fact, they didn't even have a color screen. But you have figured out a way to actually upgrade an original Game Boy or one of the many versions of it so that it does.
This I mean, this is one of the things I was geeking out about. It's you know, definitely not new technology, but you get a really cheap LCD or LED panel, and you're able to place it right behind the original panel, and then you have a backlit screen, and you don't have to worry about, you know, having direct sunlight and playing this. And you know, it scratches that nostalgia itch. But instead of talking about it, I will roll the video right now.
So it wasn't enough just to fix the screen on our Game Boy, but we need to improve the Game Boy. And there's no way better to do that than adding a backlight to it, because these screens are notoriously hard to see unless you are in direct light. So the kit that I purchased came with just the LCD panel, a resistor, and a polarization shield. And we'll get into what each of those do as we go along. But of course, the first thing to do is going to be disassemble your Game Boy. In the back, there will be 4 tri-wing bits. We'll remove those along with the batteries underneath the battery cover. And then it's time to remove the circuit board. Once you have all those Phillips screws taken out, we can unattach the front panel from the back panel from the little ribbon. Once you have the front panel disassembled and taken off, you're going to want to focus on the 2 screws here on the front by the screen. underneath this is where we're going to be able to detach the screen from the board. Also on the back of this board, there are 3 little clips that hold in the plastic piece that the LCD panel sits in, the little frame there. You're going to want to detach those clips once you kind of pop the frame out. And if you're lucky enough to have an iFixit kit like I do, you can use one of the plastic spudgers to kind of pry the screen out, but it should come out with very little effort or force. Underneath, you can see there's a couple of pads that help push the LCD screen up from the board. And here is where we're going to have to be pretty delicate, and you're going to need a razor blade or some like tweezers or something like that to get underneath the reflective panel that's behind the LCD screen. Now, the first time I did this, I did not have a problem with tearing, but the second time I did this, I did have a little bit of a tear. So really be careful, take your time. Definitely try not to scratch the glass, which fortunately I didn't, but work your way underneath the reflective panel and just kind of, pry it back a little bit at a time. What I had to end up doing with this screen is trying the other corner down below and trying to pry from there because I had already torn it up at the top. So just take your time, fold it back. These little reflective screens are on there pretty good, but once you have it completely removed, you'll want to get a hold of some alcohol or some other cleaning solution, and really make sure to clean off any leftover glue that could be on the back of the panel, because anything that's left there is going to show up through your screen, and if you're like me, it's going to piss you off. So definitely clean off the screen as best you can, and get like a chamois to kind of buff out any fingerprints or anything on the back of the screen there. So the next step is going to be getting your needle nose pliers, and we're going to have to cut a little trough in the little plastic holster for the LCD so that the wires for the backlit screen can flow through, and we'll have easier access to soldering them to the board. Just need to make enough room so that the wires don't get bunched up along the frame there. The next step is going to be installing the LCD panel. So before you take off the protective tape, I would recommend placing it underneath and making sure everything fits properly. Once you do, make sure that the wires stick down below, remove the protective tape on the panel, and then place it underneath the LCD. The next thing you're going to want to do is take out the polarization shield. So what this does is it polarizes the LCD screen, so it will give you contrast. And there's actually something we'll be doing later that will improve this. But for the time being, if you're just doing the backlight, place the polarization so that the concave side is facing up. You don't want it pressing against the glass, because then you'll have like little marks, little places where it's pressing against the glass, and that it won't look as clean. So you want to have it so that the concave way is facing up, and then place it underneath so that if you see that it's dark, that means the polarization is not correct. So you'll want to rotate it 90 degrees until it looks clear and not like you're looking through sunglasses. Once you've done that, and made sure everything fits in there properly, you can clean the screen a little bit. Make sure you don't have any dust back there again, because once you do, that'll really anger people. And the next thing we're going to need to do is warm up the soldering iron, because we will be soldering the red and black wire to the board. Now, if your Game Boy board is anything like mine, it had a little bit of a soldering overflow here just from the factory, so I'm going to clean up the tip here so I don't get my soldering contacts mixed up here, and make sure that they're definitely separated. But the black wire will go to the right of the capacitor, and the red wire will go to the left. But the first thing you want to do is get a little solder on the end of the wire, and what this will allow you to do is, when you have a little bit of solder on the end of the wire, you can then use tweezers or something like that to hold it against the soldering point on the board, and then just with one hand, and then use the soldering in the other hand. And that's kind of a trick that you can do to get it to stick to the board the way you want. So next I will be doing the red wire, which will be going on the left of the capacitor, and I will strip the outer coating here with this pair of strippers, and I've cut the wire back to the appropriate length that I want, because you don't want extra wire hanging out and touching the D-pad or getting underneath like the buttons and things like that. So should have done that with the black wire. Didn't think of it until I started working on the red wire, but I can always go back and do that later if I want. And same thing applies here with putting solder on the red wire, but we're also going to be attaching a resistor. You're going to want to put the resistor on there. It'll help give longer life to your LED panel. And if you're playing a game with multiple contrasts, what the problem I was having without putting the resistor on there was that some certain games just wouldn't load. Kind of weird. Not really sure what that's about. But yeah, tin the tip of the red wire and then attach the resistor to the red wire. And then once you have that, measure out the resistor to the length of the resistor wire to the next soldering point, which is just above the capacitor there. So now I've got my capacitor attached to the red wire, and now I've cut the length that I need it to be to go to the other soldering joint that I need it. And I've added a little bit of solder to the joint so I can get the resistor to stick to it. And there we go. Now we have the resistor in place with the red wire on the left, and the black wire is soldered straight to the joint soldering point on the board. Make sure your wires are neatly tucked away and not going out over where the buttons might be. Now it's time to test, so put the batteries back into the back panel of the Game Boy. And if you've done everything right, which you should have if you follow the steps, you'll have a colored backlit screen. You can choose from a variety of colors. For this one, I was doing it for my brother Greg. He wanted green, and I have to say it looks pretty cool. Definitely improves on the original Game Boy. And now that we've made sure that everything works properly, we're going to put it back together. Make sure to clean the screen and definitely double check if there's anything behind it. Put the 2 screws back in the front that were holding that brown piece of plastic, and reassemble. Same steps as when you took it apart, and you should be good to go. For all of these parts and other accessories, I'll have links in the show notes, so check out our show page. But you can get the LCD screen for pretty cheap, and you can also get new replacement glass, or not glass, but new replacement cover screens, because those tend to be very scratched up from the old days. So those are really cheap to replace, and you can attach them very easily.
That's actually not as hard as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, 1 resistor, very minimal soldering, and as long as you take your time and are a little bit delicate, if you have an iFixit kit, it makes the whole process a lot easier. But you can do it with basic tools.
Especially when you get into electronics kits like this, you gotta have the right tools. Because I mean, if you go in there with the wrong size driver, you're gonna start prying off components.
And you don't want to start stripping like it has the tri-wing, screws, so you don't want to strip that stuff. But it's kind of fun to take something apart that. I think this is 25 years old now, 26 years old.
That's an old piece of gear.
And it's a circuit board from a time where it's like you could take it apart and individually solder the things yourself if you wanted.
Isn't that weird? Because if you open up a Game Boy, so tech from the 80s and 90s, you've got individual resistors, and everything looks like the old-timey resistors. Now, if you open up electronics, it's all surface mount, and you can't, unless you're really, really good, you can't really desolder or resolder anything.
Yeah, it's possible. I tried to take apart a more recent DS, like I had a cracked screen or something. I tried to take it apart, and it was a real pain.
It's gone now.
Yeah, it's gone. I just never finished it because I couldn't get at the little bits that you need, like really tiny hands or like machine hands.
So what's next? Now that you've got the screen replaced and you've got a backlight, where else do you want to go in the Nintendo/gaming world?
So the nice thing about these old Nintendos is there's a lot of nostalgia, a lot of people still playing with these, and there's this whole music genre that has grown from it called chiptunes.
Right.
So I'll be getting into loading your own chiptune ROM on a custom cartridge, but also we've added a backlight, but there's another little chip that you can solder to the board that is called a bivert, and it'll flip it'll invert, the contrast of the screen, and when you flip the polarization on it, it actually gives you more contrast.
Wow.
So the screen is nice. Like, it's a lot better than it was, but you can get even more contrast out of it. So, it's just making this little guy even better and better. And you can add another thing I'll be adding is a pro sound kit. So it like bypasses the original audio stuff and
which is not great.
Yeah, it has some issues.
So this project's got some life.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun to play with this old piece of tech, and this eventually, the whole reason I started playing with this was because I wanted to put a Raspberry Pi inside of a Game Boy. I came to the conclusion that I didn't want to destroy an old Game Boy. I liked it too
Game
much.
Boy, yeah. I said, no, don't do that.
So I was like, I want to make the Game Boy better. But you know what I'm going to do next now that we have the 3D printer? I want to print a Game Boy-esque case and then put a Raspberry Pi in.
Yeah, because we were toying around with this idea of a Ras Pi Game Boy for a while.
Portable Raspberry Pi.
But you're going to have to destroy the thing. You're really going to dig apart the case and everything.
And we did that with the NES.
Yeah.
And the NES was a great project. That was a lot of fun. But I did feel a little bad about
gutting an NES.
Gutting the NES, and it was broken. Like, I didn't even have any of the parts. Somebody donated the case. But using a Dremel tool on the back of the NES case, I was like, oh, this hurts. This hurts me. But it was a fun project. Hurt. Childhood Brian's crying a little.
Now, we've got plenty more Game Boy action coming for you, as you just heard from Cranky Hippo, so stay tapped for that. When we come back, we're going to go ahead and take a little look at this. This is the thrust tester that we've been playing with. Remember, we looked at this 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
It was a way to figure out how much thrust your motors were generating so you could better design your quadcopters. Well, we're going to give you an upgrade for this to make it a super duper advanced thrust tester.
Just keep your fingers out of the way is the problem. You use super duper a lot.
Super duper.
We got our super duper guest on this week.
But before we do that, let's go ahead and take a break because we want to thank the first sponsor of this episode of Know How. Now, Brian, putting payments onto your website, it's not always easy. I mean, we talk about this on Coding 101. It's one thing to be able to develop your own code, but when it comes to actually handling people's financials, you can't have a mistake.
Yeah, for that sort of thing, I want to just be able to focus on my project and leave the finance stuff to something else.
Exactly, which is why we're proud to have Braintree as a sponsor of Know How. Now, what is Braintree? Braintree is a way to accept payments on your website, on your portfolio, on pretty much any web-based property without having to worry about coding it yourself. You take a couple of lines of code from their site, and boom, you're ready to accept it. Now, Braintree is recognized in the industry as one of the leaders of offering payments and online solutions. They offer you code for easy online payments, and if you're building a mobile app and searching for a simple payment solution, well, Braintree is a no-brainer. The Braintree V.0 SDK makes it easy to offer multiple mobile payment types. You can start accepting PayPal, Apple Pay, Bitcoin, Venmo, cards, and more, all with a single integration. Oh, these are the things that I like about Braintree. It's simple. It has secure payments, code that you can integrate in minutes, not hours or days. Now, if you're a developer, well, they got your back. Don't worry about taking days to integrate your payments with a system you've already created. With Braintree, it's done in minutes, and you can even give them a call. They'll handle the integration for you and walk you through it to make sure you get it right the first time. They also have a sandbox so you can test your code before it goes live, before it actually puts people's financials at risk. The Braintree code supports Android, iOS, and JavaScript clients. They have SDKs in 7 different languages: .NET, Node.js, Java, Perl, PHP, Ruby, and Python. They've got elegant code with clear documentation. I am a code monkey, and I just like how elegant and simple they've made it. 10 lines of in-app code, and you're done. No one else can make you that kind of offer. Now, Braintree gives you an easy way to accept multiple payment types with one integration. Quick, knowledgeable developer support if you have any questions, and you can start accepting Apple Pay, PayPal, Bitcoin, Venmo cards, and whatever's next, all with that single integration, and that's what we want you to do. With that Braintree V.0 SDK, you're going to have the future on your website in less than 10 minutes. To learn more and for your first $50,000 in transactions fee-free, go to BraintreePayments.com/knowhow. That's BraintreePayments.com/knowhow. And we thank Braintree for their support of Know How. Brian, super duper thrust tester.
Super duper thrust tester.
Yeah, totally.
Specific name, yes.
Okay, so we were playing around with this. This is just basically a Turnigy thrust stand. You can buy this right off of the Hobby King website. In fact, I think, Zach, you've got a link for this. This was under $50. I think I got it for like $48.75.
It feels really solid.
Yeah,
nice.
and all it is it's a scale. So they built in a horizontal scale here that will measure how hard an engine is pulling. So as it generates more thrust, that number is going to go up, and it tells you it's creating more grams of thrust, right?
Right.
Yeah. Now, you've also got a Turnigy 2-in-1 power meter that I'm going to want to add here. Zach, I believe you've also got a link for that. What this will allow you to do is it will allow you to start getting more information than just thrust. Remember, when we last covered this, we said that was a drawback. Thrust is great, but what is it doing to your power system?
Right, you want to see how many amps and what the wattage is, what it's pulling. Yeah.
Right, because it doesn't matter if you've got super powerful motors that can give you a lot of thrust if your ESCs aren't going to be able to handle it.
Right.
So yeah, you want that kind of information. There are a couple of other things you're going to want. That this would be old hat if you've built any of our projects for quadcopters. You're going to want electronic speed controllers. In this case, I'm using Ready to Fly Quad's red controllers, which they're about $10 a pop. Very inexpensive, but they have a very nice overhead and they scale up beautifully. That's why I've been using them for all my quadcopter projects. And also bullet connectors. You're going to want 4mm, 3.5mm, and 2mm bullet connectors.
Yeah.
You'll see in the project why I want you to have all those different types.
Yeah, we've gone over bullet connectors, and they're pretty handy to have.
Right, and also there's the silicone wire. 14 or 18 gauge. I didn't put a link for this just because people are going to have their own sources. I typically get it off of eBay, but I also buy in bulk because I know I'm going to be using a lot.
You're going to be messing around, yeah.
Yeah. As for tools, you're going to need a wire cutter, wire stripper, soldering kit, and that should be pretty much it. It's a very easy mod, but instead of talking about it, why don't we go ahead and show them? The Turnigy thrust measuring stand is a great way to learn how much thrust a motor prop battery combo can generate, but hobbyists know that it's about more than just how much power you can deliver. You also need to know how many amps will be drawn, what's the sweet spot of a combo, and what's safe. We're going to build a rig that not only can give you all that information, but is flexible enough to do it across a variety of motors, batteries, and props. You'll need a few things for this build. On the tool side, you'll need wire snips and insulation strippers, heat shrink tubing, and a heat source, a soldering kit, and some helping hands. As for raw materials, you'll want 4 sets of 4mm bullet connectors, 3 sets of 3.5mm bullet connectors, 3 female 2mm connectors, a female XT60 connector, and lengths of black and red 14 and 18 gauge silicone wire. You'll also need a brushless speed controller, preferably something in the 30 amp range, a servo tester, and a high amperage power source, like this Turnigy 4S 5000 mAh 20C. If you're going to use an ESC that doesn't include a battery eliminator circuit, then you'll also need a separate UBEC to provide power to the servo tester. The heart of our system is a Turnigy 2-in-1 power and servo meter. Connected between our power source and our ESC, its 1.5-inch screen can give us information about voltage, amperage, wattage, and min-max power. We could just solder everything together, but we want a flexible kit, one that can use a variety of power sources and motors. So the following instructions will show you how to make the various connectors and adapters that give our thrust bench flexibility. The first step is to attach 4mm bullets to both the input and output leads of the 2-in-1 tester. The tester can handle up to 100 amps of current, and the 12-gauge wire is rated for the same, so we need a connector that can handle that much juice. Therefore, 4mm bullets. First, slip the connector over the power leads. This can be a little tricky because every 4mm connector uses a male and female bullet, but they have to be swapped on either end. Just remember that if it's a source of power, then the female bullet, which needs the larger side of the cover, goes on the positive lead. If it's a device that needs to be supplied power, also known as load, then the female bullet goes on the negative lead. Double check this and make sure you get it right, because if you slide the cover on wrong and start soldering, you're going to have to desolder or snip the wires to swap sides. Soldering a 4mm bullet connector is the same as soldering smaller sizes, except that the solder cup is much larger.
Heat the connector until it flows solder, then fill it about halfway. Insert your pre-tinned lead and keep applying heat until you see the solder on the lead start to flow. Then remove heat and hold the wire still until the solder hardens. Repeat the process 3 more times, remembering that on the source side of the tester, you're going to want the female connector on the negative lead and the male connector on the positive, while on the load side you'll want the female connector on the positive lead and the male connector on the negative. Yeah, I'm going to repeat this a few more times just because it's super frustrating if you get it wrong. The 4mm leads are perfect for high current batteries, but we want to be able to use XT60 equipped batteries without having to snip and solder. So we're going to make a 4mm to XT60 adapter. Start by cutting about 4 inches of 14 gauge silicone wire. We're using 14 gauge instead of 12 gauge because 12 gauge doesn't easily fit into an XT60 connector, and XT60 equipped batteries don't require 12 gauge. Strip about 8mm from the side of the wires that will connect to the 4mm connector and 10mm from the side that will connect to the XT60. Then tin both ends of your wires. We want to first solder a female XT60 connector onto the wires. This can get tricky because XT60 connectors will deform and melt if too much heat is applied. So I use a loose male connector to hold shape and put the entire assembly into my helping hands. Tack the lead onto the conductor with a short application of heat and solder. Then apply heat directly to the lead. Once solder begins to flow, apply enough solder to fill the cup and secure the lead. You want to spend as little time as possible applying heat, never more than a few seconds at a time. And when you're done with one lead, wait until the connector cools before soldering the second. Once both leads have been soldered onto the XT60, use 3/8 inch heat shrink tubing to insulate the conductors and wires. Now let's take care of the other side of the adapter. We want to solder the female 4mm bullet connector to the positive lead and the male 4mm connector to the negative lead. Make sure you slip on the cover with the larger side on the positive lead before you start soldering. Solder the bullets as before, then slip the cover onto the conductors. You now have the ability to use either 4mm or XT60 equipped batteries on the source side of the tester, but we need to assemble the load side in a similar fashion. I'm using a Red Series 30A ESC from Ready to Fly Quads. It comes with no connectors and pre-tinned leads, so it's a simple matter of soldering 4mm bullets onto the power leads, with the female connector on the negative power lead and the male connector on the positive power lead, and 3.5mm bullets on each of the 3 motor leads. Once the female 3.5mm connectors are soldered, make sure to insulate the connector with wire and 3/8 inch heat shrink tubing. The control lead from the ESC connects to one of the sets of out pins on the servo tester. Just make sure to match up the positive, negative, and signal leads as shown on the casing. Once it's connected, we can do a quick test. Connect a motor with 3.5mm bullets, then connect power to the ESC, first making sure that the black will be going to black and red to red. Connect a battery to the ESC. Turning the knob on the servo tester should increase and decrease speed of the connected motor. Connecting the 2-in-1 tester between the battery and the ESC should let you see some power readings. If you're using a brand new ESC, make sure to calibrate it by turning it on with the servo tester turned to full until you hear the beep, then turn it down to minimum until you hear the beep. The setup as is will allow us to test motors with 3.5mm power leads and up to 30 amps of power draw from batteries with 4mm or XT60 connectors. But let's go one step further and make adapters for testing motors with 2mm bullets. We need 3 male 3.5mm connectors, 3 female 2mm connectors, and 3 2-inch lengths of 18 gauge wire. Strip 4mm of insulation from each end and tin your wires. Then solder one side into a male 3.5mm connector and the other end into a 2mm connector. Heat shrink the conductors, and now you have a way to connect 2mm equipped motors into your testing system. Using the system is simple. Mount your motor on the thrust stand, connect to your ESC using the appropriate bullet connectors, connect the ESC to the servo tester and the 2-in-1 tester, then supply power to the 2-in-1 tester. Manipulating the servo tester will throttle the motor up and down. And now you receive not only thrust numbers, but amperage, voltage, and wattage values as well. Your thrust bench will work with any XT60 or 4mm equipped battery and can deliver up to 30 amps to any 3.5 or 2mm equipped motor. Happy testing!
I am going to have to make this pretty. I'm not really good at design. This has all the functions that I want, including the really cool screen so I can figure out wattage and amperage volt.
This is coming from an engineer's standpoint.
Yeah, this is like
very
everything's
functional.
there.
Yeah.
It's just not very pretty.
It's as
it's
long as it works.
But the nice thing about this system is if you follow the instructions that I gave in that video, you will literally have adapters for everything. So this will work with these larger capacity batteries that have the big 4mm plugs on them. It will work with the XT60 batteries, which is what you're used to.
Yep.
And it will work with the 3.5 or the 2mm equipped motors. So this really is sort of a universal tester if you're building a quadcopter. And we saw last week how important it is for you to know exactly how much performance you're getting out of your motors.
Yeah, this seems like a very versatile setup that you can have here. And if you're planning on doing, a few different builds, you're not really sure which kind you want to do, this is probably something you want to set up so you have a pretty good idea of what your engines are doing.
Right, because I mean anyone can put numbers on a box, but you kind of need to know if those numbers are real.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to do one thing before we move on, and that is last time we did a thrust tester, we looked at 2 different motors, and they were hovering near the 800-gram range. Right? That's how much thrust they could generate. Well, this motor, I told you, was more impressive because this also supported 4S.
Right.
So it's more voltage, which means it's going to turn faster. And we also upgraded our ESC, the ready to fly, versus that little hobby thingy that we had. This will support 4S batteries, and it doesn't sap as much performance. So what I want to show you really quickly, and this battery, by the way, is not fully charged.
Let me clear some things off the table real quick.
If you go to the overhead, what we're going to do really quickly is we're going to tear it. So there we go. So it's going to go to 0. And this is our pull. Again,
it's really hard to see on the camera, but you can see it in person pretty
well. Forget it. Yeah, we'll just do it this way. So watch that number. I'll tear it again. Watch that number. Let's see how much I can get off of a full burn on this. You're going to have to mute my mic, Zach.
Oh man, the thing's spinning up quick. Oh man.
So
yeah, before we had somewhere in the 800 range.
With this at a full battery, this could pull 12 to 1300.
We're talking fast.
It's that's a lot of cargo capacity. just FYI.
Yeah, that's how I like my weight to power ratios.
So to put this into perspective, this one motor with this setup generates twice as much thrust as all the motors on that little 250 that we built. The hobby game.
And have you flown a setup with this much thrust?
Yes, it's scary.
It's just gone.
That's kind of what it is when you're building these things. You play with something until you're comfortable, and when you're comfortable, you're like, okay, I'm good with this, and then you move up to something that scares you again, and then when you lose the fear, it's time to build something else.
I don't know. I feel like this is kind of a level where the fear would just stay. Yeah.
Now the scary thing about this is I actually could go with a higher battery. My understanding is you can push this motor to 2 kilograms before the windings actually start to melt. But that's not good.
Right.
The other thing is the motor will actually start to heat up. So you kind of got to balance it. Like, for example, this peaked out at like 1,200 grams, but at 1,200 grams, if you held that for 2 minutes, you will cook the motor. It's just so much heat being generated.
Pulling that much power.
Right, yeah. Now, we will be bringing you more testing projects for quadcopters because, Brian, I don't know about you, but for me, I love flying quadcopters, but I enjoy building them more.
I have noticed that. Yeah. And I enjoy flying them and letting you build them for me. So
Which, see, this
good
is
combo.
This is a good combo. So I'll build them, you fly them,
I'll crash
them, and I'll rebuild them.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Now, when we come back, we're going to be jumping into your questions. And you've had some really good questions the last couple of weeks. So we want to give you a couple of minutes to make sure that we can provide you with some insight. But before we do that, let's thank the second sponsor of this episode of Know-How. Brian, do you sleep at night?
It's one of the few things that I'm good at,
I'm actually, I would put myself on, not to brag, but kind of pro level.
Right.
Pro level sleeping. Yes.
I've seen the example you provided in the no-hole.
Actually, that's a very good thing. That happens because my bed right now is not great. It's actually kind of
But if it was better, you may not fall asleep at work?
I may not, yes. Well, we know this, right? I mean, how many times have we read studies that correlate bad sleep with poor performance. And it's not just I'm tired, I need to take a nap. It's bad decision making. It's bad productivity. It means that you're staring at your screen and you're just kind of zoning out. That's what ill sleep does for you, which is strange because there are so many of us who will spend a lot of money on our computer, will spend a lot of money on our tools, will spend a lot of money on our toys, but when it comes to sleep, we're like, well, the cheapest thing is what we're going to get.
And you spend, what is it, like a third of your life sleeping?
Well,
so
more like half.
Half of your life? If you're
I
like
spent
us, it's half your life.
Half of my life sleeping. Why don't I take it more seriously? Well, folks, you can if you use Casper. Casper is a sponsor for this episode of Know How. Now, Casper is a way to get a comfortable, good bed with good sleep, with great characteristics, without having to go through the rigmarole of buying a traditional mattress. Now, when you buy a traditional mattress, you go to a store. They got a couple of demo units on the floor.
Kind of roll around for a while, yeah.
What can you really tell from 60 seconds of laying on something? I mean, they're all soft.
I want to use it before I have to go to work the next day.
Precisely, and that's what you get with Casper. Casper actually gives you more than 3 months to take home one of these mattresses, use it, see if it actually does everything it says it's going to do, and then at the end, you get to decide whether or not you're going to keep it.
Yeah, but I live in an apartment. It's really hard to get a mattress up some stairs and stuff. Like, can you get it delivered?
You can get it delivered. Wow, it's as if you know about this company.
I've heard about it.
This is strange, Brian.
I've seen the B-roll. I haven't actually gotten one yet.
You know what, Zach? You got to show them what it's like to get one of these things in your house. Oh, Leo Laporte himself uses a Casper mattress, and we all know, and if you watch it to a TV network, you know Leo only likes the finest things, which is why he uses Casper. Now, it's obsessively engineered, and it's at a fair price because they do cut out the showroom. They cut out the middleman, so they can give you a factory direct price. It uses 2 different types of technology. It uses latex and memory foam. Now, latex is what gives you that support. Memory foam is what gives you that sort of sinking in feeling. And when you combine the two, it means you get a mattress that's soft, but also gives you support. That feels good, but that's not gonna, make you all sweaty in the middle of the night. This is what Casper is good at, and well, that's why we love having them on Know How. We've already explained that you can buy it online. You can have it delivered completely risk-free. You can try it for over 3 months so that you don't have to lie down for a couple seconds in a showroom. You can actually try it and see if it's right for you. These mattresses are made in the U.S., which is something that we personally like. Here's what we want you to do. We want you to take your sleep seriously. Get a Casper mattress. $500 for a twin, $950 for a king size. Compared to industry averages, that's actually really, really good. And you can save an additional $50 as one of our audience members by going to casper.com/knowhow and entering the promo code KNOWHOW. That's casper.com/knowhow and use the promo code KNOWHOW. What are you waiting for? Go ahead and get a Casper mattress, try it for 3 months, and tell me if it's not the best investment you've ever made. And we thank Casper for their support of Know How. Brian, we got some questions.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
I'm guessing from our Google Plus community?
This is all from the Google Plus community. Remember, we're going to tell you this at the end, but let's go ahead and do a pitch for this now. Go to Google Plus, look for the Know How group. We're over 8,300 members, and it's a great place to ask us questions. If you ask a good question, we'll try to get into the show.
Yeah. And
what's the first one?
First question comes from Cameron Skinner, and he would like to know if he put LEDs on his Alien X, it could connect him directly to the power or distribution board. If I want to connect them using a switch on the transmitter, what do I need?
This is a good question, and actually,
because he wants lights.
He wants the lights, and this is something that we've played with. Actually, at the very beginning, one of the very first mods I made to that 250 is I added LEDs. Now, LEDs are cheap. This is this is red. Yeah, these are some red or blue LEDs that you can buy in a roll. The nice thing about this is I think this whole roll was $7. These are all surface mount LEDs, and they have adhesive on the back so that you can just stick it to the frame. These will actually just solder straight into your power distribution system, which is what I did, because it is the simplest way to do it, and it keeps down weight. I think these are, so that's blue, these are red, and I think I've got some ultra bright whites. Yeah, these are white. It's a really cool way to add a little bit of splash to your quad, especially at night.
And I wouldn't add them not only for splash, but just so you know which is the front and which is the back.
Exactly. That's something that a lot of the pre-manufactured quads will have. They'll have different lights on the front and the back, so you know which way it's facing.
It helps a lot. I mean, the colored propellers will only do so much at a distance.
Yeah, especially if it's dark.
Especially, yeah, if it's dark,
forget it.
You definitely have to have LEDs.
Yeah, and I know you've found this before. If you get far enough away and you can't really tell, you kind of give the stick a little jiggle to see which way it goes, and then you try to correct, and you hope you corrected the right way. I've seen people crash because they just keep getting further and further away.
Yeah. What I like to do is have a color in the back, a different color in the front, and then maybe like a landing strip, like a white light. So then if you're landing in a dark field, you can kind of see what's going on below you.
Right. Which is why we've got this. So we've got blue, we've got red, and then we've got white. So this white, this big roll of white, and these are all weatherized, by the way, so these are a little heavier duty, will give you a nice view of what orientation your quad is in without having to actually jiggle it. But
essential.
What the poster wanted is he wanted a way to turn them on and off, because in this way, the only way to turn them on and off, at least in my original mod, is unplug them. I put a plug so it could go into the harness.
And he wants it on his transmitters.
He wants it on his transmitters, and that's actually kind of cool to be able to turn on the lights.
That would be really cool, yeah.
Well, all you need is one of these. This is a Turnigy receiver. This is a radio-controlled on-off switch. It looks like a tiny little electronic speed controller.
It does. Yeah.
It has one lead. This goes into your receiver, so I can turn it all on and off. And this is just a switch. So when it's on, power goes through. When it's off, power doesn't go through.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really sick. And you could use it for something other than LEDs too, right?
This specific one was actually designed, I wanted a higher amperage one. This was designed to run a smoke machine. So you can
you could put a smoke machine on your quad?
You can
that's cool.
turn on smoke and like...
Right, yeah. Spell out something in the sky.
Exactly. But I mean, that's all this is. It's just a fancy switch.
That's cool.
Now, the cool thing about a project like this is I'm going to use this to turn my lights on and off, but as you figured out, I could do pretty much anything. So if I wanted to control a winch, if I wanted to control the smoke machine.
Yeah, or you had a smaller quad attached to the bottom of your quad that you wanted to deploy in midair.
Or if one of us had tried and experimented with putting an airsoft gun on a quadcopter.
Yeah, you could, whatever you need a switch for. Yeah, that's pretty cool. How much is that?
I got this on eBay for, I think, $7.
$7? Yeah. And it's not, I mean, it doesn't look like you'd be adding any weight
It's not a lot of weight. Now,
the hardest part would be threading the wiring, I guess.
Yeah, this it will add a tiny bit of weight, but not a whole lot. I mean, you're talking about maybe for the entire assembly, like 15 grams.
Okay, yeah.
So for 250, you might feel it a tiny bit, but probably not. For a 450 class, no, it doesn't matter. Doesn't
Very
care.
cool.
Yeah. All right, so that's getting lights. What else do we got, Brian?
All right, this is Cable Nirvana. This comes from Terry Henderson. I stole your pic off Twitter. I have one question. How would you ever troubleshoot for a broken patch cable?
This is a very good question, and actually, that's why I brought out a little something. If you go back to that post, Zach, go ahead and show that picture. It's a beautiful picture. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a data center. Yeah, like, this is kind of mesmerizing, right?
It's beautiful.
And there are a couple of things here I really like. I love the fact that it's so neat and clean. I don't like using zip ties into racks like that because it can make it kind of troublesome. But it is a work of art. It's an absolute work of art. But the poster, Terry has a very good question, which is, if one of these broke,
how would you ever know?
How would you know? Or if one of them got detached from one end, how would you find it?
I would just cry. Done.
No,
I'm out.
I'm out.
Nope.
Well, we actually showed you the tool already when we showed you this. Now, unfortunately, I may have broken this since the last time I had it on the show.
How would you have done that, Padre? What were you doing?
Maybe a bottle of Coke.
Yeah?
Yeah.
A bottle of Coca-Cola?
A bottle of Coca-Cola.
Yeah?
I cleaned it up, but it's not working quite right. But
did you use your patented 3-tap system before you opened it?
It wasn't my soda. Someone put a bottle of soda into my gig bag and it blew up. Like it got too hot. And
so someone sabotaged you.
I was sabotaged.
You were sabotaged. Okay.
But the Fluke's sending me a new one, but I think this one's kind of hosed. Now, remember, we used this when we were doing premise wiring, right? Because this could tell you whether or not you did a right patch.
You're right, and we played with the cable that I made. Yeah,
it was very unhappy.
Yeah, I didn't like that. No. But so this one on your right hand, that was one where you could use like a radio signal to pick up
this is a probe, and this will actually send signals. So what I can do is if I set this to, let's say, that musical thing, I can actually put this into one of the wires. So I find one end of the cable that I'm having issues with, and hopefully it'll work. If I turn on the probe,
so
you hear that sound?
Yeah.
So that's coming off of the cable. And if I go to the other end of the trunk here, so ideally this would be far, far away. I'm picking up a lot of stray signals.
Fluke
if I
network.
get close to the trunk,
It's
right, it gets louder and louder. And so when it gets really, really loud, oh, and it just died again.
oh no.
When it gets really loud,
That's when
this
you-
goes up to 8 and it tells me, oh, that's the cable that you're on.
Okay.
So, and this is a very common tool. The Fluke's not the only company that makes this, but it's a nice way to figure out what goes where if you haven't labeled things properly.
All right. So say we have that situation with all those cables. Would you have to plug that into every?
Well, no, but I mean,
One of those
because
cables.
ideally what would happen is something would break and you lose service on one of your devices. You would take the cable out of that device,
So
plug
you
it
would
in.
know which cable it was.
Correct.
You're just trying to figure out where along that cable it is.
Right.
Okay.
So for example, like up here, let's say a computer loses connectivity. I can plug this into the cable connected to that computer,
And you
go
know.
down, and then start waving my wand around to find, oh, that's where it is.
Okay, that makes sense.
There we go. Yeah. So, yeah,
That's the way to do it.
It's not the best, especially when you spill soda on your tools, but it is a good way to do it.
And we have another question. And this one's about 3D printing. Actually, two questions. This comes from Donald Burr. Has anyone ever bought from shapeways.com? Seems to be some sort of 3D print on demand service. Have you, Padre?
I have, yes.
Okay. So, all right.
So Shapeways it's interesting. Zach, if you go ahead and go to their website, this was before people could buy inexpensive 3D printers. It's also a place where you can get much higher 3D print quality items.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So you send them your design, and it's the same design that you would use on your 3D printer, but they have much higher end machinery, which means they can give you you can get you a lot of details. Find some of the things that you can actually print on Shapeways. It's absolutely gorgeous, and they'll use top-notch materials, and you can get super fine details. Essentially, it's a fast prototyping shop.
Okay,
You send them
so
what
you
you
send
want,
them
and
the
they'll build
model,
it for you.
they build it, because you may or may not have a 3D printer on premises, but you want something to try out.
Right, and this is also a marketplace. So if you make something that you think people might want to buy, you can market it to people.
That is so cool. I
Right?
never thought about train stuff. Like
Exactly, no.
HO scale, 3D printed train. My grandpa would have gone nuts for
Yeah,
this.
this is the thing about the 3D printing revolution, which is it's anything.
That
it's
is so
literally
cool.
anything you can think of, you can print.
Wow.
Yeah,
That
And
is awesome.
I used Shapeways before because I needed to make some objects with really fine tolerances.
Right.
And even a good 3D printer, even a good 3D printer is going to give you some burrs. It's not always the nicest print that you can possibly get.
Did this
Did you
just
some
get
keys?
delivered?
I just got delivered just this second.
I don't have any
this
keys.
is,
I was
you know,
unprepared for this.
Wait, hold on. You know what? My notebook is really sharp.
Let me move my laptop.
Wait, can I borrow the edge of your laptop for
All
just a
right,
bit?
it is a MacBook
It is a
Air.
MacBook Air. Remember, it's supposed to have a razor-thin edge.
Getting this on
Oh,
camera.
wow.
Yeah,
That actually-
MacBook Air, man.
Actually worked. I didn't expect that to work.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so this is something that Zach ordered from Shapeways.
That's
and,
convenient.
I have no idea what this is. I hope.
Should we open this, Zach?
Is this-
Yeah, you can open it. I'll tell you guys what it is.
Oh, what is this, Zach?
You won't be able to recognize this just by
I
looking
know
at
exactly
it.
what this is, Zach.
Well, Brian knows what it is.
I know that part goes into this part.
I think it's
Wow,
something to
this
go
looks
to your
really
Nerf gun, is what
Yes.
I think it is.
These are custom printed parts to modify this Nerf gun so that I can take out this rotating chamber here and attach 3 more onto it.
And I mean, look, let me grab a demonstration of a 3D print that we got from our machine. Our machine is
mean,
pretty dang good.
These things that you ordered, Zach, they look like they were printed from like a mold.
Right,
They
so-
don't look like they're the things that we've printed.
I mean, go to the overhead. This is actually pretty good, but I mean, if you can see it, I mean, just right off the bat, you see how much nicer the surface is on Shapeways parts than on the 3D printed parts. From
Yeah, these look
downstairs.
like they were CNC'd almost. Like you can't see any. It just looks like it's from a mold. It's
Right.
awesome.
I think this is using their stereolithography machine.
And
So
that
it's
is-
not a 3D print. It's a laser that goes into a vat of emulsion, and it actually just pulls the print up.
Really?
It just
Like
builds it layer by
Terminator?
layer. Yeah.
That's
It-
awesome.
It gives you super fine detail. I mean, this will get you down to 0.1 millimeter. I
Yeah.
think this gets you down to something like 0.0001 millimeter.
That's pretty cool. Okay, I could see where Shapeways would be pretty useful.
And actually, what a lot of people will do is they'll use a 3D printer to come up with something that they want. They'll make sure that it's right, because Shapeways is
Right.
it's a little expensive. And once they have the design exactly the way they want it, they'll send it to Shapeways.
That's cool.
Yeah.
All
So
right,
just to show you guys real quick, this is what the once I put those parts together.
Jeez, man, this is like overkill.
All right, but we had a two-parter, right?
Yes, and then the second part of the question was, what do you recommend for a good starter 3D printer for a guy on a budget? I see Padre is really into the DaVinci Junior, and at $350, that is the price point that is reasonable for my budget. However, I've heard some somewhat negative things about them, that they are very proprietary. We discussed that.
Yeah.
/ not open, etc. Comment, suggestions?
Okay, so here's what I would say. Yeah, they got proprietary on the filament. You
Yeah.
needed that NFC chip. I will also say, I've already busted the DRM on that. I don't think I can actually show people. I was checking this. I think it actually would be a DMCA violation. So, but it might leak out at some point
Somehow.
on a blog
somehow.
post.
I mean, because
Anonymously.
we're not like we're not into hacking stuff or anything.
We don't hack things.
So.
No, we only use things for their intended purpose, the way that they were intended to be used.
No, I think the DaVinci, they went around the way they went about it was great. Like
Yeah.
the price
Price is
terrific. The print head great.
Quality is good,
You know, the way that you're able to just put the file on an SD card, plug it into the
Yep.
device. That's great. That it's just that one thing that left like a bad taste in my mouth, and it's
You know
just
what it's like?
reminiscent of all those other printers that I've ever owned.
It's like the Keurig 2.0 machines, where actually it's a pretty good machine, but they DRM the coffee pods, and it's like, why would you do that?
Come on.
You're just gonna tick us off.
You know, there's just some like '80s guy in the corporate office.
We've already
like,
broken it. Yeah.
yeah.
This could be awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
This
can't
idea's
wait.
never been used, like with inkjet printers decades ago.
Business guy.
Now, I will say this. Someone pointed out the fact that you can now get a DaVinci 1.0 for about the same price as a DaVinci Junior, just because prices are going to drop. Now, it's not as advanced in some aspects, but the DaVinci 1.0 will actually print out ABS and PLA, so you can get both types of material. ABS tends to have a bit more flexibility to it, so it acts more like plastic. It's not as advanced in terms of the head and the feeding system, but those are both pretty good options. And you can delete the DRM, so don't be too concerned about that.
Yeah, don't let that hold you back. I mean, I guess for the other DaVinci, if you really needed something with ABS, because I mean what's this polymer?
PLA.
PLA.
Yeah,
It seems
it's corn.
pretty solid.
It's
for the
pretty
things that
solid.
we've done.
One of the things that people don't like about PLA though is, unlike ABS, it doesn't flex. It breaks.
It just shatters.
So it's super strong, but it will just
up
crack.
until the point.
Versus ABS, ABS acts like what we expect plastic to act like, which it will start to flex before it gives.
So if you were going to try and 3D print props,
You probably want to do that ABS.
Yeah.
You probably don't want to do PLA. PLA would be bad. Actually, I would just not. Don't
even 3D
print props.
I know, it's just it's a question
They're
that
so
I've seen
cheap,
come
people.
up a few times.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
It's like you're going to save yourself 10 cents. Stop
What about,
it.
okay, frame. If you're going to 3D
Frame.
print self your frame.
Yeah.
ABS.
Actually, I already have done
Okay.
a couple of 3D printers. I crashed a few. By the way, there are a couple of people in our group who are crashing a lot. Yeah, you should probably use a 3D printed frame because you guys crash a lot.
Or
Which is
play
good.
with the Syma. If you're
Yeah.
if you're feeling a little bit rusty, fly that around for 15 minutes before you go out and fly your expensive, $250.
I think so.
Final question here.
Final question.
All right, card charging my batteries. This comes from T. Raburn. I got the IMAX B6 charger, but I'd like to be able to plug it into the car. Is there an adapter for that?
Answer is yes,
Ooh.
absolutely, T. Rayburn. Now, go in the overhead. This is the charger that most of us have. This is an official. This is an IMAX B6, and you can tell because it actually has. There's a code on the back that you can verify against their server to tell you it's an official, not a counterfeit. I only buy the official ones because the counterfeits normally burn out.
Okay.
Really, really quickly.
Is that a really big problem?
That's
Counterfeits?
a really big problem. Yeah, counterfeits are just they're not.
Well, I mean, I understand the counterfeit would be a problem, but there's a lot of counterfeits of these sort of things.
There's far more counterfeits than there are originals.
Really?
Yeah. But it accepts 12 volts, which is actually the voltage you're going to get out of your car. So all you need is something like this. Now, I just had this lying around my lab because I've got everything.
You got a lot of stuff
around my lab. But if you were to go into a Radio Shack, and they still exist, or a Fry's,
surprisingly.
Yeah, you're just looking for, oh gosh, I really should have figured out how many millimeters this plug is. But this goes into the same power port, and now I can plug this straight into my car. This will work just fine.
Nice.
There is one caveat, and that is how much power you can actually draw from your car's accessory port. Now, it's safe, absolutely safe at 1 amp. So if you set this for 1C charging, no problem, but that's kind of slow. What you might want to actually do is look through your car's manual. It may tell you how much juice you can pull through your accessory port. If it doesn't tell you that, look in your manual to find out which fuse in the fuse box is tied to the accessory port. Because you can look at that and say, if it's a 10 amp, it means I can pull 120 watts, because it's 12 volts, through my system before I blow that fuse. And the fuse is always set lower than the cabling because you don't want the cabling to blow. You want
burn out. You want the fuse to burn out.
Right. Now, that's not the pure number because most cars will also route other things through that accessory port. But I would say if you've got like a 10 amp service on your accessory port, you should be able to pull half of that, 5 amps, so 60 watts before you overload your car system.
So charging on the go.
Charging on the go. Now, we do want to depart with a parting shot. This is something that I found, and it is disgusting. Zach, if you go ahead and run this, what you're looking at is a picture, a little video from the sewers of West London. Now, Brian, what do you think they might have in the sewers of West London?
I'm going to guess the things that you would normally find in a sewer, but maybe minus the alligators that we technically have here.
And actually, this is very indicative. We have this problem. Wet naps.
Wet naps?
Wet naps are deadly to sewers. This is, they called this thing, I can't remember the name. They had a name for it. It was like a monster.
Wait, okay, so we're like floating in the sewer right now, right?
This is 10 tons of wet naps and fat. Now, wet naps are the enemy not just of West London, but of all sewers because they don't fall apart and they attract oils. So basically they become roadblocks and they glom onto things and then they become, this particular roadblock became 40 meters long and it was so heavy, it actually broke apart a multi-meter 70-year-old sewer pipe. And it's going to cost them about £500,000 and 2 months to repair.
Wow.
Oh, by the way, I should probably tell people, please don't watch this while you're eating.
If you were planning on eating anytime in the next week, don't watch this video. Do they eat like a lot of barbecue wings? Like something you need wet naps, ribs,
Well, I mean, the funny part is, we've been told, oh yeah, wet naps are nice and sanitary. They are demon spawn for sewer workers.
Yeah.
It's just, they don't fall apart, they don't biodegrade, and they're strong enough so that they'll start to like attach to one another, and then they just form this big
like monster
clod.
Like the grave mine from Halo or something. Like, I've been expecting you.
Hold on, give me a moment.
Yeah. Ugh.
Okay, now that we've left you with that.
The poor drone that has to go down there. What? Yeah, what was that?
I hope it was a robot. I
really
hope it was. Please.
Right?
Yeah.
No, there's no way they'd send a person down there. No.
I know it happens
we'll
in
have
India.
To do some more
okay, just stop. We're going to stop.
Oh, God.
Okay, folks, now that you're completely grossed out, that's the end of this show. Now, we know that this was a lot of material. Actually, this was a particularly long show.
Yeah.
If you want to find out what we covered, if you want to see the instructions for putting together his Game Boy, my thrust tester, or if you want to look at the questions that we covered in the feedback, you got to go to our show notes, which is where, Brian?
At twit.tv/KH. And not only can you find our show notes, but you can find handy links to subscribe to whichever audio or I would suggest video. You should probably subscribe to video.
Watch us.
That you prefer. And not only that, but if we're doing like an overarching project like we've been doing with these quadcopters, you'll definitely want to go back and make sure you didn't miss an episode.
Yeah.
And that's not the only place you can find us.
Yo, you're going to find us on our Google Plus group. So again, you're going to go to Google Plus, you're going to look for know-how. We've got 8,300 plus members of this community. It's a lot of quadcopters right now, but we also get a lot of networking questions. If you've got questions, if you've got a project, if you want to show off something that you've done, or if you want to ask for emergency help for a project that's falling apart. This is a great community to belong to.
Or if you're like Michael Hertz, who happens to be breaking his quad a lot.
A lot.
We, we actually like to see those, so please keep posting those. But we do feel a little bad about all the quads breaking.
We feel bad, but we have always said that crashing is learning.
Post your project results.
Learn more. Now, Google Plus isn't the only place that you can find us. You'll also find us on Twitter, on twitter.com/PadreSJ. That's at PadreSJ.
And I am at cranky_hippo. And since we don't have Alex tonight, we should definitely introduce Zach on the show.
Zach, I don't know if you've got a camera on yourself. He's gonna furiously go through it. But could you please tell the folks where they can find you on Twit TV?
Oh, you know I have a camera on myself, and you can find me on Twitter at EskimoZach. That's EskimoZach.
Yep.
Thank you guys for the fun show today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for covering.
Now, one last bit, and that is in 2 days. So this Saturday, May 2nd, we're going to have the premiere episode of the new Screensavers, and you're going to love it.
Not this weekend.
No, because we're in a time machine right now, Brian.
Oh, right. Yes.
This Saturday, May 2nd, we're going to have the premiere episode of the new Screensavers with Leo Laporte and friends. Brian and I are both part of the show. We'll be contributing on and off. You'll see us as co-host and segment contributor.
Yep.
But if you watched any of the goodness back in the old ZDTV or Tech TV days, we're bringing it back. I'm so excited about this. I just want to talk about it.
Yeah. We had a lot of fun just making the opening to the show.
And you almost killed me.
You almost killed yourself, and there's GoPro footage to prove it. But
I was lost. That GoPro footage was lost.
Yeah, it's a very strange feeling. I watched Screensavers when I was in high school, and now I'm like participating in it.
I remember I was so happy because I got tickets to go watch a live taping when I was living in Berkeley.
Oh wow!
And I'm like, oh my god.
Right?
Wow.
It's cool. It's going to be a lot of fun.
We're kind of geeking out right now.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So we hope you tune in, watch it, and subscribe.
Yeah. And until next time, I'm Father Robert Ballester.
And I'm Brian Burnett.
And now that you know how,
go do it. That's Gameboy. Where's